As the first light of dawn broke over the battlefield, O'Neill and his team trudged back to the Xi'an stronghold. The signs of their hard-fought victory were written on their faces, grime-covered, blood-splattered, but filled with a newfound hope. Zarnak's hand on O'Neill's shoulder was a silent acknowledgement of their unity in the face of overwhelming odds. The stronghold itself was a bustling hive of activity. Xi'an soldiers and civilians alike worked tirelessly to fortify their defenses, their renewed vigor evident in every action. When O'Neill's team arrived, they were greeted with cheers and applause. News of their success had spread quickly, and for the first time in weeks, smiles lit up the faces of the beleaguered defenders. General Danner stood at the center of the stronghold, coordinating with his officers and Xi'an leaders. His stern demeanor softened slightly as he saw O'Neill approaching. "Good work, Sergeant," he said, extending a hand. O'Neill shook it firmly. "Couldn't have done it without the team, sir, and the Xi'ans." Zarnak nodded. "This victory is just the beginning. The Zarthans will not be so easily deterred." Danner's expression turned serious. "Agreed. But this gives us the momentum we need. We have to capitalize on it. Our next target is their supply lines. We cut those, and they'll be significantly weakened." O'Neill glanced at Zarnak. "You know the terrain better than anyone. Any suggestions?" Zarnak's eyes narrowed in thought. "The Zarthans have several key supply depots scattered across the southern continent. If we can coordinate simultaneous strikes, we can cripple their logistics network." Danner nodded. "We'll need to move quickly. Sergeant, gather your team. Lieutenant Zarnak, I want you to lead the reconnaissance missions. We need detailed intel before we can launch the assaults." The days that followed were a blur of activity. O'Neill and his team, along with Zarnak and a group of elite Xi'an scouts, embarked on a series of covert missions to gather intelligence on the Zarthan supply depots. The recon missions were dangerous, each one taking them deep into enemy territory. They navigated through dense jungles, scaled treacherous cliffs, and infiltrated heavily guarded facilities, all while evading Zarthan patrols. Each night they returned to the stronghold with critical information, mapping out the locations of the depots and the routes the Zarthans used to transport supplies. The more they learned, the clearer the strategy became. Danner and his officers devised a plan to strike the depots simultaneously, dividing their forces into small, agile units capable of rapid deployment. On the eve of the assault, O'Neill's team gathered for a final briefing. The mood was tense but determined. They knew the risks, but they also understood the stakes. This operation could be the turning point in their war for survival. Danner addressed the assembled soldiers, both human and Xi'an. "Tomorrow, we strike at the heart of the Zarthan war machine. Each of you has a critical role to play. Remember, our strength lies in our unity. We fight not just for victory, but for the future of Zio 3. As dawn approached, the teams moved into position. The assault began with a coordinated series of explosions, rocking the Zarthan depots and throwing their forces into disarray. O'Neill's team led the charge at the largest depot, a sprawling complex nestled in a valley. They moved with precision, taking out guards and sabotaging supply lines. Explosions echoed through the valley as fuel depots ignited, sending plumes of smoke into the sky. The Zarthans, caught off guard, scrambled to mount a defense. But the combined might of human and Xi'an soldiers proved overwhelming. They pressed the attack, pushing the Zarthans back and seizing control of the depot. Throughout the southern continent, similar scenes played out. The coordinated strikes left the Zarthans reeling, their supply lines in tatters. The victory was a significant blow to their war effort, and it sent a clear message. The defenders of Zio 3 were not defeated. In the aftermath of the assault, the Xi'an stronghold became a hub of celebration. Soldiers and civilians alike reveled in their success, their spirits lifted by the knowledge that they had dealt a crippling blow to their enemy. O'Neill and his team were hailed as heroes, their bravery and skill a beacon of hope in the darkest of times. Despite the jubilation, Danner remained focused. "This war isn't over yet," he reminded them. "We've won a major battle, but the Zarthans will regroup. We need to stay vigilant and prepare for their retaliation." O'Neill nodded. "What's our next move, sir?" Danner's eyes hardened with determination. "We take the fight to them. We've weakened their supply lines, but to win this war, we need to strike at their leadership. Our next target is their central command on the northern continent. The northern continent was a formidable challenge. It was the Zarthan's stronghold, heavily fortified and bristling with defenses. The path to victory would be fraught with peril, but the defenders of Zio-3 were ready. With renewed determination, they prepared for the next phase of their campaign, united in their resolve to reclaim their world and secure a future free from the shadow of the Zarthan invasion. As preparations for the northern offensive continued, O'Neill found a moment of respite. He stood at the edge of the stronghold, gazing out over the war-torn landscape. Zarnak joined him, the two warriors sharing a moment of quiet contemplation. "Do you think we can do it?" O'Neill asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zarnak's eyes were distant, but there was a steely resolve in his voice. "We have no choice but to succeed. Our people's survival depends on it." O'Neill nodded. "Then we'll make it happen. Together." With that, the two warriors returned to their duties, their minds focused on the battles yet to come. The war for Zio-3 was far from over, but with their unity and determination, they would fight on. They would face the darkness head-on, knowing that victory was within their grasp. The assault on the northern continent began with a series of calculated strikes designed to weaken the Zarthan defenses. O'Neill and his team spearheaded these operations, targeting key installations and disrupting enemy communications. Each victory brought them closer to the ultimate prize, the Zarthan Command Center, a massive fortress built into the side of a mountain. As the defenders of Zio-3 prepared for the final assault, the tension was palpable. The command center was the heart of the Zarthan war effort, and its capture would be a decisive blow. General Danner and Lieutenant Zarnak stood at the forefront, their leadership inspiring confidence in their troops. "Today we end this war," Danner declared. "Our target is within reach. We will strike hard and fast, giving the Zarthans no time to react. This is our moment." The assault began under the cover of darkness. O'Neill's team infiltrated the outer perimeter, disabling security systems and clearing a path for the main force. They moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine, each member knowing their role and executing it flawlessly. The Zarthans, taken by surprise, mounted a desperate defense. The fortress erupted in a cacophony of gunfire and explosions as the defenders pressed their attack. O'Neill led his team through the labyrinthine corridors, their objective clear, the central control room. The closer they got to the control room, the fiercer the resistance became. Zarthan soldiers, their exoskeletons gleaming in the dim light, fought with a ferocity born of desperation. O'Neill's team matched them blow for blow, their resolve unshakable. As they reached the control room, they found it heavily guarded. O'Neill signaled for his team to take positions, preparing for the final push. "On my mark," he whispered. "We go in fast and hard." With a nod, they moved. The doors burst open, and the room erupted in chaos. O'Neill's team spread out, targeting the Zarthan officers and key systems. The control room was a hive of activity, holographic displays flickering as the battle raged. O'Neill spotted the Zarthan commander, a towering figure clad in ornate armor. Their eyes locked, and O'Neill charged, his combat knife flashing in the dim light. The Zarthan met him head-on, their weapons clashing with a resounding crash. The duel was intense, each combatant pushing their limits. O'Neill's training and experience were matched by the commander's brute strength and ferocity. As they fought, the control room around them descended into chaos, the fate of the battle hanging in the balance. With a final, desperate lunge, O'Neill drove his knife into the commander's chest. The Zarthans staggered, their eyes wide with shock, before collapsing to the floor. O'Neill, breathing heavily, looked around. The control room was theirs. With the command center in their control, the defenders of Zio-3 quickly turned the Zarthans' own systems against them. They disabled the enemy's communications and defense networks, sowing confusion and chaos among the remaining Zarthan forces. General Danner and Lieutenant Zarnak coordinated the final phase of the offensive, directing their troops to mop up the last pockets of resistance. The tide of battle had turned, and the Zarthans were in full retreat. As the sun rose over the battlefield, the defenders of Zio-3 stood victorious. The war was not yet over, but the capture of the command center was a decisive blow. The Zarthans' leadership was in disarray, and their forces were scattered and demoralized. O'Neill and his team, exhausted but triumphant, returned to the stronghold. They were greeted as heroes, their bravery and skill a testament to the indomitable spirit of the defenders of ZO3. In the days that followed, the stronghold became a hub of activity. With the Zarthan threat greatly diminished, the focus shifted to rebuilding and fortifying their defenses. The alliance between humans and Cians had proven its worth, and there was a renewed sense of hope and determination. General Danner called a meeting of the leadership to discuss the next steps. "We've dealt a significant blow to the Zarthans, but we can't afford to be complacent," he said. "We need to secure our gains and prepare for any counterattacks." Lieutenant Zarnak nodded. "Our scouts report that the remaining Zarthan forces are regrouping. We should take the initiative and strike before they have a chance to recover." O'Neill agreed. "We've got the momentum. Let's keep pushing. We can drive them off XEO3 for good." The plan was set. The defenders of XEO3 would continue their campaign, targeting the remaining Zarthan strongholds and eliminating any remaining threats. The war was far from over. As the weeks turned into months, the defenders of ZIO3 waged a relentless campaign against the Zarthans. Each battle brought them closer to their goal of liberating their planet. O'Neill and his team were at the forefront of every operation, their bravery and skill inspiring those around them. The Zarthans, once a formidable foe, were now on the defensive. Their numbers dwindled and their morale shattered. The defenders pressed their advantage, launching coordinated strikes that left the enemy reeling. The final push came as winter set in. The last Zarthan stronghold, a heavily fortified base deep in the mountains, was their ultimate target. The defenders gathered their forces, ready for the decisive battle that would determine the fate of ZO3. General Danner addressed the troops one last time. "This is it. The Zarthans are on their last legs. We finish this today, for ZO3, for our future." With a roar of determination, the defenders marched on the Zarthan stronghold. The battle that followed was fierce, the cold air filled with the sounds of gunfire and explosions. O'Neill led his team through the thick of it, their resolve unshakable. As they breached the walls of the stronghold, the Zarthans fought with a desperation born of impending defeat. But the defenders were relentless. They pushed forward, clearing room after room, until they reached the heart of the base. The final confrontation was swift and brutal. The remaining Zarthan leaders, cornered and outnumbered, fell one by one. As the last of them was subdued, a cheer erupted from the defenders. The war was over. The victory was complete. The Zarthans had been driven from ZO3, and the planet was free at last. The defenders, both human and Xian, stood together, their bond forged in the fires of battle. In the aftermath, the stronghold became a symbol of their unity and resilience. The rebuilding process began in earnest, with both species working side by side to restore their world. The scars of war would take time to heal, but there was a sense of optimism and hope for the future. O'Neill and his team were celebrated as heroes, their names becoming legends among the people of ZO3. But for O'Neill, the true reward was the knowledge that they had secured a future for their children and their children's children. One evening, as the sun set over the rebuilt stronghold, O'Neill stood with Zarnak, gazing out at the horizon. "We did it," he said quietly. Zarnak nodded. "Yes, we did. Together." O'Neill smiled. "What's next for you?" Zarnak's eyes gleamed with determination. "There's still work to be done. The Zarthans may be gone, but we need to ensure they never return. We need to build a future where our people can live in peace." O'Neill agreed. "We'll do it, together." As they stood there, watching the sun dip below the horizon, they knew that their journey was far from over. But with their unity and determination, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. The war for ZO3 had been won, but the future was theirs to shape. And so, a new dawn rose over ZO3, a dawn filled with promise and hope. The defenders had fought for their world and won, and now they would build a future worthy of their sacrifice. Together.